Merci Vanessa. Et merci à tous d'avoir... Ah, OK. Merci Vanessa. Merci à tous d'avoir été avec nous ces 2 dernières semaines. I have to say, you all look fantastic this morning. Really. So, as these unique games come to a close, I just want to thank all of you, members of the media, for joining us again, especially early this morning, but really for covering the incredible stories of Team Canada and telling those stories to Canada and to the world. It's not always easy, and it wasn't always easy in this setup. We know that. It wasn't always easy getting to the clusters where we wanted to be, but you got there, and thanks for telling their stories, the stories of our incredible athletes and the stories of these games so well. I just want to thank the organizing committee of the Milano Cortina 2026 Games for delivering the first Olympic Winter Games under this new model, which is basically to bring the games to the venues instead of requiring the venues to be all in one cluster. Obviously, that comes with some challenges, and the IOC will no doubt learn from these games. We've learned from these games what worked, what didn't work, and we'll look for opportunities that will be presented for future games. It does provide opportunities that weren't there before. Congratulations to our new president of the IOC, Kirsty Coventry, on her first games in her new role. I think the Olympic movement is in very good hands. Congratulations to our host country, Italy, celebrating its best performance at a Winter Games. And that's thanks to the support and funding their athletes received, and you would have heard about that and read about that in their media. And of course, thanks to that extra lift a home games brings. We saw that, we certainly saw that in Vancouver in 2010. Finally, I just want to say to every Canadian athlete who competed here, thank you. Every one of the 206 Team Canada athletes, 206 of the best athletes in the world. We are best athletes in the world, 206 of them, showed up in Italy to own the podium. They made me proud to be Canadian, and I know they did the same for so many people back home. We heard about the kids stopping class. I remember that for the hockey game against Russia, where we got to stop our class and watch those games. I'll remember that for the rest of my life, and I'm sure the kids back home will remember that. But it's been inspiring every single day. Our athletes inspire me every single day. It's been a magical few weeks, highs and lows to be sure, but as always, the games are a time when our common humanity is on full display, and that connects us and that brings us together. And I, for one, think the world needs that more than ever these days. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you, Tricia. And now please welcome the COC's CEO and Secretary General. Il est le chef de la direction et secrétaire général du Comité olympique canadien, Monsieur David Shoemaker.
Thank you. Merci, Vanessa. By many measures, these were spectacular Olympic Games. As Tricia just said, Team Canada athletes made us all so proud. I too had the opportunity to travel to each cluster and to see firsthand some performances that will stay with me forever. L'expérience d'avoir vu nos athlètes donner leur tout pour fièrement représenter leur pays en recherchant la plus haute marche du podium en est une que je n'oublierai pas. Mikhail Kingsbury's cathartic gold medal in dual moguls, Megan Oldham's big air gold on a stormy night up in Livigno, Valérie Maltais, Yvonne Blondin, and Isabelle Weideman repeating gold in team pursuit, Piper and Paul's magical skate that I'll admit had me choked up, and I think ranks as one of my all-time favorite moments. That's the good news. But it's not the opportunity. It's not what I want to use this opportunity to talk about. 2 weeks ago, I sat up here and highlighted the concerns we had for the future of Canada's national sport program. Over the course of the Games, I did a number of interviews and read a number of headlines expanding on that theme. And I'm glad so many of you seized on that story. From my perspective, it is an essential conversation ahead of Los Angeles in 2028 and the French Alps Games in 2030. So let me reiterate the headline. Canadians deserve a sports system that is properly funded. National sports organizations are stretched unbearably thin. They are forced to make impossible choices, to cut essential support staff, cut training camps, cut participation in international competitions. They have to choose between supporting athletes competing here and now in Italy and the next generation coming up behind them. And now athletes are absorbing some of these costs through team fees that grow higher and higher every year, or out-of-pocket expenses for private coaches or state-of-the-art equipment they cannot afford. Many of Team Canada's medalists at these games are well into their careers. Almost 3/4 of them are in their 30s, the same percentage in their second or third or fifth, in the case of Valérie Martin, Olympics. These are the beneficiaries of 2 decades of adequate investment in the system. The money's drying up. The bench is not deep. I'll let Eric and Jen talk more about what that means for athletes and for the system, but what I want to focus on is why it matters. More than 16 million people across Canada watched the opening ceremony on CBC Radio Canada 2 weeks ago, the largest audience since Sochi in 2014. These games themselves are the most watched ever on CBC Radio Canada's digital platforms. In classrooms and school auditoriums across the country, Canadian kids took a break from class to watch hockey and cheer on their heroes. On Bay Street, people gathered at temporary screens and atriums and elevator banks and erupted as Steve Dubois skated for gold. And as tens of thousands celebrated at Team Canada Fan Fest events across the country, many were inspired to try a new sport like ski jumping or figure skating because they saw what is possible under the maple leaf. These games brought us together, as they always do. In return, they provided an opportunity to ask ourselves, how do we want to show up on the world stage? What kind of country do we want to represent? Who do we want to be? In some ways, I think waiting 8 days for a gold medal emphasized this point. If you felt something when they finally raised our flag and they played our anthem, you understand what I'm talking about. There is only one solution to this challenge. Core funding for national sports organizations has not increased in 20 years. It needs to. It's the money these organizations, which form the backbone of our sports system, count on to fund operations, athletes, coaches, and support staff. They safeguard the pathway from playground to podium. In that same 20 years, the COC has increased its revenue from private sources by about 300%, and subsequently increased our investment in the sports system. So I want to once again thank the COC's 39 marketing partners and the Canadian Olympic Foundation donors, without whom Team Canada's athletes quite literally would not be here. And I should add, this includes last night a very generous donation of $1 million, which was confirmed last night from a new donor. That isn't enough, though. I wish we could do exponentially more. But Canada's sports systems, from kids at the grassroots level to the heights at the Olympic stage, does not work with private investment alone. You've heard this from us before. You've heard it from others. In its preliminary report last year, the Future of Sport in Canada Commission echoed the urgency of this message. When we call on the federal government to inject more funding into sport at the national level, it's not just for the sake of medals, though we know we can win more and that Canadians want us to. It's not just because Canada spends less per capita on sport than our G7 peers, and it's not because the private sector isn't doing its part. We need to invest in the future so many more Canadians can experience the many more benefits of sport, so that more of the best of us can live their Olympic dreams wearing the maple leaf, because that is what a country like ours should be doing. This isn't just about sport, it's about nation building. It is, to borrow a phrase, about what makes Canada strong. It was just a month ago that Prime Minister Carney made an international headlines with his inspiring speech at Davos. In that speech, he talked in large part about ambition, about the strength of Canada at home and the values we can and should project to the world. We realize sport isn't the answer to all of this government's many urgent priorities, but to Prime Minister Carney, who addressed Team Canada in a hockey jersey, who called Team Canada athletes as they topped the podium this week, who believes as much as anyone in the power of sport, I would say this: sport is an integral part of that strength of character and country. Sport represents a set of values that define us. Through sport, we have a real opportunity, if not a responsibility, to be ambitious about how we want to show up as a nation, both on the world stage and in communities across the country. Team Canada athletes have proven here in Italy that we have the talent, we have the drive, we have the potential. The imperative now is to match that ambition with sustainable long-term investment. Los Angeles 2028 is just 27 months away. I think we can all agree that showing up here strong, prepared, and unmistakably Canadian is the only option. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, David. J'ai maintenant le plaisir de vous présenter le chef du sport du Comité olympique canadien, M. Eric Myles.
Merci Vanessa. Bonjour à vous tous. Nous voilà déjà à la dernière journée de ces Jeux de Milano Cortina 2026. Est-ce que les choses ont commencé comme on l'aurait espéré? Probablement pas. Mais les performances étaient au niveau, la motivation et la détermination étaient présentes. Nous savions tous que ce n'était qu'une question de temps avec le calendrier et les compétitions qui progressaient. Je suis certain que vous avez chacun de vos moments olympiques favoris. Je voulais en partager quelques-uns avec vous. Évidemment, Mick Kingsbury, une première médaille pour le Canada. Celui nous a fait verser des larmes. Courtney Sarro, première patineuse en courte piste, a mérité 4 médailles lors d'une édition des Jeux olympiques d'hiver. Peut-être ma plus grande émotion, c'est pas une médaille, mais Diana, Maxime, au patinage artistique, quand on connaît toute l'histoire, et les voir ici, c'est un petit miracle d'arrière-scène. L'émouvante et incroyable performance de notre équipe de poursuite féminine, David l'a mentionné, en longue piste, avec Isabelle, Valérie, Ivani. Kim Boutin, sa 6e médaille olympique en carrière pour égaler le record canadien aux Jeux olympiques d'hiver. Et toute une équipe de courte piste assez incroyable et excitante. Quel sport! Une finale olympique de hockey féminin qui nous fait retenir notre souffle jusqu'à la dernière seconde. On y a vraiment cru. C'était fou. Le curling de retour sur leur podium. Quelle fierté. Et encore un gros match de hockey à venir aujourd'hui. These athletes left everything out there. On the ice, on the snow, on the track. Their coaches were exceptional. Their support teams were relentless. Their preparation was world-class. Ces moments forts de nos athlètes sont bien souvent l'histoire d'une vie. Ils sont dans les pentes, sur la glace, dans leur sport depuis leur enfance. Et les voici aujourd'hui à faire vibrer toute une nation. Ils sont nos plus grands ambassadeurs. Et ils méritent tous notre admiration et surtout notre soutien. Notre soutien qui doit être à la hauteur de ces accomplissements et de ce qu'ils nous donnent au Canada et à chacune de leurs communautés et dans chacune de leurs communautés. As we count down the hours to the highly anticipated hockey games this afternoon, we are celebrating 5 médailles d'or, 6 médailles d'argent, 9 médailles de bronze, 16 top 5, 23 top 8. So yes, there is a much to applaud here in Milano Cortina. But we also have difficult questions in front of us. David mentioned many. Where do we go from here? What does our future look like? LA 2028, the French Alps in 2030 and beyond. Over the past 2 decades, the global high-performance landscape had changed dramatically. As we witness other nations accelerate, investing exponentially more in coaching, sports science, technology, training environment, our system is in decline. National sports organizations are having to cut training camps. Je parlais à l'équipe de ski de fond, ils n'ont même pas été capables de faire un camp ensemble avec les deux groupes nationaux pour regrouper leur équipe. Il n'y avait pas assez de budget. Staff with PhD in sports science wonder if they'll have a job next year. Our athletes pool is shrinking. C'est pas stable. Ça marche pas. L'équation fonctionne pas. Injured athletes aren't being replaced because there is no one in the pipeline ready to compete at this level. And promising athletes are leaving high-performance sports because they can't afford all of out-of-pocket costs. Je reste avec l'exemple du ski de fond. Félicitations, tu fais l'équipe nationale et les coûts pour faire une année au complet sur le circuit mondial, 40 000 $. Holding down a job while trying to focus on training is unsustainable for many, and having to take a loan to finance their journey, like Isabel Weidman, a multi-medalist, Olympic champion, and flag bearer had to do to compete here in preparation for the Olympic, is simply unacceptable and heartbreaking to witness. Laurent Dubreuil, pour finir sa saison, il s'en va coucher chez un de ses amis pour se couper dans les coups et être capable de finir la saison. Ils ont tellement tout mis en place pour être aux Olympiques, il n'y a plus de fonds. Honnêtement, c'est ce que j'ai trouvé le plus difficile dans ces Jeux. Ce sentiment de ne pas avoir été en mesure d'aider nos athlètes davantage. C'est comme si on leur dit, ben go, allez-y, allez vous battre avec les meilleurs au monde, mais désolé, on ne peut pas vous offrir le minimum nécessaire pour partir à égalité sur la ligne de départ. Ça me bouleverse vraiment. Nous sommes vraiment inspirés par la performance des athlètes. La prochaine génération, le Next Gen qu'on les appelle, ils sont incroyables malgré ces conditions difficiles. 9 des 23 résultats dans le top 8 ont été accomplis par eux, y compris 3 dans le top 5. C'est incroyable. Our athletes have as much, if not more, heart than anyone on this planet. They give everything to wear the maple leaf on their heart. They carry our flag with pride, often at great personal cost for them and their family. But heart alone and smiles cannot outplace systemic underinvestment forever. Come on. If we want to continue celebrating moments like these ones we experience here, the gold medals finals, the breakthrough performance, the iconic Canadian victories, then we must ensure the foundation beneath those moments is strong. Si nous désirons poursuivre cette aventure du Canada et revivre ces moments de fierté et d'inspiration pour nos jeunes et l'ensemble des Canadiens, nous devons absolument faire davantage. It is time for us as a country to match their commitment, not to let them down, to provide a national sports system that is resourced to compete, to give our athletes the stability, the depth, and the support they deserve, and to invest not just in podiums, but in the pathway to make podium possible. Parce que les performances que nous avons vues ici ont émerveillé, parce que nous voulons continuer cette tradition d'excellence dans le sport canadien. Merci, Milano Cortina. Merci à nos athlètes et un énorme merci au Canada et à toute l'équipe derrière l'équipe. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. She is Olympic champion in freestyle skiing moguls, 4-time world champion, a 3-time Olympian, and Team Canada's 2026 chef de mission. Voici la chef de mission de l'équipe olympique canadienne, Jennifer Heil.
All right. Merci, Vanessa. Quelle belle aventure nous avons vécue ici en Italie. Merci tous pour l'accueil tellement chaleureux. Over these last 17 days, we have seen extraordinary performances. What it means to wear the maple leaf. One of the greatest examples to me is Valerie Malte We know her story, 5-time Olympian. We saw her performance. But what really showed what she was made of and those Canadian values is when she crashed in the mass start, got up and fought to be back in that race. After the race, she told me, "I don't believe in giving up." She had her medals. She had the best performance. I'm sure she was exhausted. And yet there she was, finishing the race like a true Olympian, representing our country. We saw what it is to compete with ambition and carry yourself with humility. I can't think of a better example than Megan Oldham, the most humble human I have met, who can soar to extraordinary heights, the toughest person perhaps at these games, crashing in a very brutal way to get up and go and win a medal and come back and follow it up with gold. And then we've seen what it is to be Canadian, to show up on and off the field of play. And that is our coaches and our mission staff, who have thrown every ounce of pride and passion to support their athletes, despite the serious challenges. And I got to see those challenges firsthand, and I can tell you that I was incredibly touched and moved by the commitment of our team, but it's not easy right now on the ground. We've talked a lot about what those challenges are, those financial stress that the athletes and the whole system is carrying. Flat operational funding to NSOs in an inflationary world is a cut. We're creating a pay-to-play system in Canada where wealth and luck are some of the major determining factors as to who gets to stand on a podium. We know that the athletes are paying on average $25,000 per athlete to be here and represent our country. What does that mean in actual fact? Well, when I sat with one of the teams where they stood up before the games and talked about how proud they were to be a part of their community, they also mentioned that, you know, they told their younger teammates that they should eat better when they're at training camps in Europe, that they looked at their cart at the grocery store and they're like, "You need more vegetables, buddy." Now, that could be a part because he's away from his mom, but their actual response was he couldn't afford the better groceries. This is the reality. Yet they stand there and talk about the pride and the gratitude to be there. I was pulled aside in the village by one of our staff members who's one of the greatest minds in sport, could be employed in any country around the world, has been to 9 Olympics, but chooses to work in Canada, telling me he doesn't know if he'll have a job next year. And then I've heard from, the organizations that basically families are in a position to do one Olympic cycle in many of these sports. So these athletes are leaving before they have the experience, before they are at their peak, able to stand on that podium. So we're investing all this way and then losing the talent. But what struck me the most was, the athletes where the results didn't go the way they wanted, and that ambition is so strong. They were carrying a heavy weight, they were disappointed, but they were ready to get to work again tomorrow. These are the athletes that our country has created. These are the values that they represent. They will always do more with less. But the problem is that our system is starting to be misaligned with our Canadian values. Personally, I want to live in a Canada where every kid who dreams of being an Olympian has an equitable chance. My Olympic dream started at a gas station in Edmonton with my mom when I picked up an Olympic preview of the 1994 Olympics. I want every kid to pick up a magazine or see, the sports and have that dream be a real reality for them. David mentioned how, being humble doesn't cancel out ambition. And in fact, that combination of being ambitious and being humble, I think, is a value and a character trait that the world needs more of. And I can tell you, we're the best in the business to bring that forward. So going forward, I hope to see NSOs government, the private sector, and of course the COC come together to create an ambitious plan, a multi-year strategic plan like we did in 2010. This isn't new for us. We've done it before. We can do it again. One that commits the necessary resources to build a sustainable system of excellence. The minimum standard isn't about just more money for sport. It's about maintaining service levels, restoring purchasing power lost to inflation, and committing to automatic annual indexation with clear accountability from the sports system. Well, this is drawing us to a near close. We know we have another very big event today, but over the last 17 days, I don't think we can argue that our athletes, that our Canadian athletes, have shown why sport matters. Bravo à tous les membres de cette merveilleuse équipe Canada 2025. Ce fut un privilège de partager ce parcours avec vous. Merci de m'avoir fait confiance et me confiant ce rôle de chef mission. Merci.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you for your leadership in supporting our athletes over the last 17 days. Before we open up to questions, we'd like to thank Tricia for being with us here this morning. We know that you have to head off for a 9 o'clock meeting at the IOC session, so thank you. And if anyone has questions for Tricia, please let us know and we will connect you with her later today. Nous prendrons maintenant le temps pour des questions des membres des médias. Je vous rappelle d'utiliser les microphones fournis et d'identifier votre nom et organisme en même temps. We ask that you share your name and organization before asking your question. We have volunteers circulating the room with handheld mics. And so who would like to go first? We can get the mic over to Cahal.
Morning, Cahal Kelly with the Globe and Mail. Is it possible to speak in specifics? How much do you get now? How much do you want?
Yeah, we've made a budget submission for the 2025 budget on behalf of the national sports organizations, asking the federal government for $144 million, backed by a study that Deloitte did of all of the 62 national sports organizations. That we believe would properly address the funding challenge for high-performance sport, next-generation sport, and help national sports organizations to develop the sport at the grassroots level. Oh, well, we don't, this isn't for the COC, right? This is for the national sports organizations. The funding envelope is in the range of $220 million today for the entirety of the national sports organizations. Yeah. We don't, this is not an ask for, I just want to be clear. You're saying how much do we get, how much do we want? Yes. They get in the range of $220 million. We're asking for $144 million annually on top of that.
Can we get the mic in the front? Oh.
Sorry, and Cahal, the 220 includes the athlete assistance budget that for the 2,000 or so carded athletes nationally.
François David, du Journal de Montréal. Comme mon collègue parle d'argent, Adam Van Coverden était ici durant les Olympiques. Il voulait parler aux médias, sûrement parler de cette situation-là. Est-ce que vous, le Comité olympique canadien, vous avez eu des discussions avec Adam Van Coverden pendant les Jeux olympiques ici à Milano Cortina? Et quelle était la nature des discussions? Est-ce qu'il voyait ce qui se passait sur le terrain, puis ce que vous demandez?
Oui, on avait plusieurs discussions avec M. Van Coverden avant les Jeux olympiques et puis aussi pendant les Jeux olympiques. La nature de la discussion, on était dans les merveilleuses performances des athlètes et je pense son espoir de leur donner le soutien qu'ils méritent. I'll say in English, hopefully, just a bit more. He's an Olympic champion. He knows what it takes to reach the highest level in the Olympic Games. He spoke to so many athletes, and they conveyed their experience to him. I'd like to think that he understood that message and has returned back to Ottawa with that message. I don't know if Eric or Jen, you'd want to add.
C'est impossible qu'il ne comprenne pas la situation. Pour lui-même avoir été un athlète, avoir parlé avec les sports, puis les fédérations, les athlètes surtout, de cette situation. Puis on revient, on l'a mentionné plusieurs fois, que la collaboration est bonne, mais là, il faut vraiment que les actions suivent de leur côté. Comme David l'a mentionné dans son mot aussi tantôt, autant M. Carney, toute la passion vers le sport, et maintenant, les discussions importantes et surtout les décisions et les actions doivent suivre, comme on l'a mentionné. C'est là qu'on est rendu.
Je vais faire le suivi là-dessus. On parle de Vancouver, on parle de M. Carney. Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est un peu hypocrite et de façon politique d'aller voir avec le chandail du Canada, d'aller voir féliciter les athlètes, mais qu'en arrière, on dirait qu'on fait la sourde oreille et on ne met pas d'argent dans le programme, dans le sport à travers le pays?
Non. Premièrement, on est tous des supporters de l'équipe canadienne, puis ça, on veut ça. S'ils n'avaient pas le gilet de l'équipe Canada ou tout le soutien, ça serait malheureux. Là, on serait à un autre endroit. Alors, tout leur cœur, leur soutien est là. Par contre, je le répète, on est rendu à l'étape, là, on doit parler sérieusement. Et au-delà, non, il faut passer à l'action sérieusement. Et ça, c'est de leur côté présentement, il faut que ça avance.
We can get the microphone to my left here. Third row, please.
Thank you. Donna Spencer, Canadian Press. I've done a few closing COC news conferences. There's a real seriousness to this one. And I guess for Canadians, why is it a serious matter if its team drops out of the top 5 countries in the world on the medal table?
I think I tried to spend roughly 10 minutes explaining that. Because on the one hand, the joy, the inspiration, the impact, the pride in country we get from these incredible performances is overwhelming. The energy, the intensity of the emotion. When our Canadian women were on the brink of winning that gold medal, the feeling we all had, not just here in Italy, but back home in Canada, that we were on the brink of this incredible moment as a country, contrasted with the incredible feeling of sadness when we lost that game. It's kind of what sport is about. We kind of win all together. The Olympic sport is all about. We win together, but we lose as a country. And at this moment in the world, more than ever, it's worthy of our attention, our investment, and our support. By every measure, what's going on in Canada with shuttered classrooms, offices taking breaks to watch this team compete, there's an intensity, there's an emotion, there's a level of interest that, here's the other side, that is not being matched by our collective level of support that we're providing to these wonderful athletes. And so what I was trying to convey was there were incredible medal moments. We could sit here and say, hey, 5, maybe 6 gold medals is more than Beijing, where we won 4. 21 medals, not bad, not far off. But we're competitive. we look up at the medal table, we see the countries ahead of us, we aspire to do better. And so and we worry about the future. And so what you're sensing from us is this collective seriousness that in order to do better, we have to continue delivering this message. And I feel like we've been trying. You know, Cahal asked the question, what have we asked for? We've asked for a sliver of what other countries are giving to their Olympic programs, where their billions and billions of dollars are being invested by competitors. But we want to be measured. But what's important here is I kind of feel like saying, if you don't take my word for it, listen to the Future of Sport in Canada Commission. The government commissioned the Chief Justice of Ontario to do an analysis of what's going on in our sport system. And the only recommendation that came with urgency that said there's a time limit to this recommendation is she said the national sports organizations in this country urgently need funding. And then if that's not good enough, listen to the athletes themselves. Their collective stories should leave a lasting impact. They certainly do on me.
I was just going to jump in. For me, it's a question of values. What I was saying was, you know, a pay-to-play system I don't think is a Canadian value. I want all kids to dream of excellence. Excellence is an important value in any country. Sport brings connectivity and pride. It allows us to move forward as a country. I don't think it's very hard to measure, but it's a critical factor. And as a parent, I've never believed more in sport. It's one of the greatest tools I have to raise my kids in a world where it's kind of soft. You know, they have to learn how to win and lose. And my son doesn't dream of being a community grassroots soccer player. He dreams of being a pro soccer player, you know? And so that pathway has to be clear to keep our communities healthy and inspired. They're not disconnected, you know, winning medals and having a healthy community.
Next question.
Briar Stewart, CBC. You just mentioned, you know, the pride and the atmosphere around the women's hockey game the other day. Obviously, everyone's getting ready for the gold medal game today. And I'm wondering if you can just speak to kind of that moment. I mean, this was the kind of rivalry everybody wanted to see.
Yeah. Well, those are two of the greatest rivalries in Olympic sport. Certainly in the Winter Games, everyone was hoping to see the Canada square off against the U.S. in the women's gold medal hockey game, and I think certainly there was a lot of expectation around Canada versus U.S. in the men's gold medal hockey game. We know there's an intensity around it. We know that people have been trying their best to find jerseys here in Milan, and they're not available. And even back home, stores are sold out. But it goes back to that core message that this feeling of patriotism, pride in country, the aspiration to do great things on the world stage, to sing "O Canada." I've sung "O Canada" a few times at these games. I want to hear an entire arena sing it, and I think all Canadians do. And there's a real drive among those players, as I understand it, to be able to deliver on that. And we'll go in there with a real urge to cheer as loudly as we can, let them know that they have our support. But what the nature of sport is, and if they don't, we're gonna feel terrible, put our heads in our hands, and move on. Those teams will shake hands, and I think that's what's beautiful about sport. There's 96 countries competing here at these Winter Games. It brings people together. compete fiercely and then leave everything else behind.
Good morning, Sean Fitzgerald, Post Media. David, you've made the ask for that budget increase. This isn't the first time. What has been the response to this point from government?
To this point, we have not been successful. That I've been in this role. This is my 7th year as CEO of Canadian Olympic Committee. One of the first things I did when I took on this role in 2019 was interview virtually every leader of the Canadian sports system, the national sports organizations, talk to them about what they needed. And in almost every case, because there are a few exceptions of NSOs that are doing okay because they have commercial programs that allow them to fund their sports, but putting them aside, in almost every case, it's like the message was clear. We need an increase in our core funding. It hasn't changed since 2005. So we started with the Canadian Paralympic Committee lobbying on their collective behalf, on behalf of 62 national sports organizations. And we've come up dry every time. The response has always been positive. This is wonderful. If you could, provide the data specifically. So we commissioned Deloitte to do the study. This is wonderful. If you could make it clearer to the Ministry of Finance. We've done this. We followed all of the guidance that we can, the experts in Ottawa. But it's important that to the extent that we've been able to talk to Prime Minister Carney directly and Adam Van Koeverden on many occasions, there is incredibly strong support for the idea that investing in sport is good for our country. It just hasn't happened yet. So we're going to remain optimistic. We're going to continue to push. Our athletes deserve that from us. And we're not going to stop until we see movement in this space.
And then just a quick follow-up on that point. Politically, if it sounds like that's the inertia, would it be a politically difficult sell to say, feelings, and I understand that, the feeling of hearing the anthem when, inflation has been mentioned on the stage, that groceries have been mentioned on the stage, that's an issue for everyday Canadians as well.
Well, there's no question that this for the government is about competing priorities. This is nation building at its finest at a very modest expense when you compare it to pipelines and icebreakers. It's also, when you think of this investment in national sports organizations, is on the one hand about investing in our high-performance athletes at the Olympic stage, but it's also about helping them develop and grow their sports at the grassroots level. This is addressing affordability as well, that our national sports organizations have not been able to fulfill their mandate of setting the programs and policies for sport at the grassroots level because of this lack of funding increase. And so sport is becoming increasingly inaccessible at the grassroots level, and that needs to change too. That's very much Jen's message. It doesn't fit our vision for sport in this country. We aspire to have a country where Canadians lead the medal table at the Olympic Games, inspire generations of young children to want to get into sport, and they have the access to that sports system. It's inclusive, and unfortunately, it's trending in the opposite direction.
Just want to add, it also there's this clear view that sport is also it's been mentioned in different ways, but part of making us strong and proud. And with everything's going on, economic, politics situation, it's not the time to have our head down and to back up. It's the time for Canadians, for all of us, to be strong and solid. And sport is a strong way to express this as a country, and that we strongly believe that. And it's not just about the Olympic, how it was being explained.
You talked about some of the countries at the top of the medal table are investing a lot more in sport. Do you have a sense, for comparison purposes, what Norway, Germany is spending per capita? Can you quantify that? Is it possible?
Well, the answer is we have a sense that this, to a certain extent, is a competitive thing, and there isn't great data on, they'll share some of it with us, and some National Olympic Committees are more forthcoming than others. It is also complicated by the fact that the models, no two models are the same in terms of where money goes and how sport is funded. But as we've looked at it, we believe we're being outspent by Australia, Great Britain, our European counterparts, both on a per capita measure and on a total measure by multiples. And that makes it incredibly difficult to compete. Yeah.
I'd just like to add, we're asking for two things. One is the resources to create a sustainable system, but the other one is a strategy, multi-year strategy. That doesn't exist today. And so there's a lot of things that other countries are doing that works. I think a good comparison is New Zealand and Australia in terms of economy, population size. They make very targeted investments, very strategic investments. They develop the pathway. So that is going to be if that's the way that Canada decides they want to build their system, that requires some difficult conversations. But we're of the mind that, well, personally, I'm of the mind that resources are tough. We have to make strategic decisions. And that's what we want this conversation to also be about, having those conversations. Because more money without the strategy also isn't going to build the system that we want.
I guess my follow-up is, you mentioned the Future Sport in Canada Commission, and we are, I guess, coming out of these Olympic Games, sort of asking questions about our system. Like, how much of a crossroads is Canadian high performance sport right now? I don't know, Dave or Jen, you want to tackle that? Or Eric?
Well, I think this is we're quite deliberately using this as a moment to reflect on how we've performed at these Olympic Games and where we want to be as a nation. And this is not the result that, especially in the Winter Games, that we aspire to have. And we know we can do better. We demonstrated in the early 2000s that when we set our mind to something, we can achieve it, and we can achieve it at a very high level. We announced coming into these games a 10-year plan. Team Canada 2035. We aspire to be top 5 in the world on a combined basis when you add up the summer and winter results. We aspire to get 1 million more young people into organized sport in this country. And we aspire to preserve our sporting environments. We have a strategy on podium, play, and planet. We need a partner to see that vision and join us in achieving it. It is all possible. Look what Italy did at these games. If I remember correctly, in Vancouver, Italy had 5 or 6 medals. And look where they are today. It should give us all real belief that if we take this opportunity, evaluate where we are, and decide that our vision for sport in this country is to see great Canadians fully supported, matching the level of the intensity of Canadian support for them with the investment that they get, but also delivering on a system that allows Canadians to get into sport in an accessible way. At a very modest investment, we can get to a place where we are surpassing how Italy did in these games, and helping achieve the vision that we have 10 years from now.
We are so ready to discuss with the government, discuss about the plan, and it also brings us back to who we are as Canadians. and we see country like, targeting, and going more focused. But for us, it's winter and summer too, and already there is a choice, how we go there. But then how we also adapt to who we are as Canadians today, the new community, the reality, and what are the sports that speak to the community and that are that will connect with children and everyone, and how we go deeper when we make choice and we look at a plan and we look at some of the country and some of the result. You make a choice. I'll go back with my example of the cross-country ski team. I mean, you support a sports like this, well, the entry point when they're junior, when they're U23 and everything, it cannot just be such a hard entry point. And then we lose those high potential people. We need to make it more accessible, facilitate and grow within this and create that movement in Canada. And so how we look at those specific sports, so that we're ready to discuss with this and look at a mix of that focus, balance, with supporting a broader systems, and this will, again, rise up everyone in the system.
I'd just like to explicitly answer your question. Yes, this is a crossroads. And we are at the end of what we did really well in 2010 and that investment. And so this moment is important because it prevents the outsized damage to the whole system. We have the people in place. We have the experts. We have a lot of things, but if we don't act, we lose that and we start even further behind.
And can we get the microphone to my left, the back of the room, Heather? And then we'll go back to Cahal. You still had a question too. Back to the back of the room. Lady in the red.
Hi, thank you. Heather Butts with CTV News. This press conference started with a blanket statement of, highs and lows, lessons learned. Could someone be specific? What would be the biggest lesson learned or the biggest challenge faced, and where the COC could have done better at these games?
From a performance standpoint, Heather?
No, more organizational. I mean, we faced challenges. You had athletes spread out, quite a distance. Is there something, I apologize, I believe it was Tricia who started this and she left. Is there something that you've come away from? We've spoken so much about funding, but is there something your perhaps biggest lesson learned from these games?
Well, it's an important question because we will return in 2030 to this model with the French Alps, with several sport clusters existing some distance from one another in a dispersed model. So we've paid very close attention to what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, putting cluster leads in place that have real autonomy, moving from a specialist model to a generalist model. So people being responsible for more than one thing in Cortina, for example, and more than one thing in Livigno, for example. And we would say, I'll leave it to Eric, this is really his team that is responsible for this. But on balance, that's worked extremely well. We've learned that as it relates to, let's call it health and illness, that because of the distance, what might be happening in one cluster from a medical standpoint isn't necessarily happening elsewhere, and that maybe you have to put in place specific measures to prevent the spread of flu in a mountain cluster, and it's not prevalent in a city cluster. And we've learned some things about how we operate hospitality houses in this model. So the traditional model for us is to be in the big city center with Canada Olympic House. And we moved to a model that many nations shared, where we moved it around from one cluster to the next. We were in Cortina, we were in Livigno, and then now we're back in Milan. And to supplement that, invested in Ice Palazzo that Hockey Canada, Speed Skating Canada, and Skate Canada put on. We heard from the athletes in the outer sport clusters that it was the first time they and their families and friends could participate in Canada Olympic House, almost to my surprise. And yet we also heard from fans in Milan saying, where's Canada Olympic House today? And we had to tell them, well, it's not scheduled to be here today. So we have to figure out how to find that balance. My overall conclusion is that the logistics of being so dispersed is hardest for the people in this room. It's not a huge stress on athletes who tend to go to the one place and focus on their competition. The villages were great. The food was quite acceptable. Not a huge stress on the coaches and the support people around them. But for those of us who need to move from one to the next, or would like to move from one to the next, that was a little challenging. Sorry, that was a lot challenging. And it, to the extent that it didn't feel wintry here in Milan, when it was, let's say, 15 degrees for the last several days, you probably would have wanted to see what it was like in Livigno when it was snowing a foot a day and there were avalanche warnings. I mean, it was a very, very different environment in these outer regions of this Milano Cortina Winter Games. And it was fun to feel. You could walk from moguls to aerials to ski cross to big air to the half pipe, and that was pretty cool. So, yeah, I think that while the athletes did extremely well, it was really the people, for us and for you in the media, that's where the challenge was probably most prevalent.
It's hard to have a specific answer right now. Like the fact we're not done. Like, and one big thing for us too, it's to be as good from day one to late today, and even I would say a few days even coming up, like until we're back home. Actually, that's truly, you see it like climbing a big mountain. It's not just going up; it's coming back at the end, and that's a big vision that we have as a team. Also, when we look at all those preparation, winter games about 5 years preparation, summer 7 years. So we're already working on Australia, for example. We're quite aligned for LA of our plan. And in the Alps right now, so much learning that we have here. And of course, a series of debrief are coming and building up already on the team. I have to say we're proud of our operation behind the scene. Despite those reality, we were ready. Like, you know, within the 5 years prep, I mean, if you're too surprised there's something wrong, you did. It was an important test to our leadership and how we decentralize our strength, and the response went really well with the team there, and layering what David explained. One thing we did, and that we will measure that really deeply and carefully, is, again, and don't want to reconnect everything, but it does, like we're making so much effort to reinvest in the sports system to maximize. We went far. We went deep in our own work, and even with people, to free up the maximum budget to reinvest in the sport. Have we gone too far in few aspects? There's things that I'm not going to share today. We're going to look carefully on it, but it's like maybe how we adjust this, how we tweak this to be even better for the upcoming games. We will adjust, and again, the debrief in the next few weeks will set us up and give us some more clear answer there.
We have time for 2 more questions. Robin?
Hi, Robin Doolittle, Globe and Mail. You guys have named Stephen and Valerie as the flag bearers, and you've spoken a little bit about them. Can you just reiterate why they were chosen?
Yeah, so obviously there were great performances. It was a discussion behind the scenes as to who our flag bearers would be. Valerie represents, I think, what it is to be an Olympian. 5 times, 2 sports. I think she's a part of the bigger story here, and that's women competing into their mid-30s and winning. That's something we haven't seen on scale before. I know Valerie a little bit behind the scenes, and, you know, to commit to 5 Olympic Games where your best performance is your last, that's an incredible commitment to yourself as well and your belief. And these are the values that Olympians are made of. And more than that, she's also an amazing team leader and contributes to the culture of her team, is a big part of winning that gold medal behind the scenes as much as on the ice. So that was the decision there. And then Stephen, you know, came into these games already as a 3-time Olympic medalist, and obviously came out with his first gold medal in an individual performance. And he is, the short track program, he is a huge contributor to that program. He's incredibly tactical, incredibly calm. And I don't know if you heard his remarks in the press conference, but for him, this moment was about sharing it with his teammates. And I think that shows you what kind of leader he is, and you know, that he's a big part of the heart of that team. And so those aspects all combined is what led to our decision.
Last question.
Thank you very much. I know we're running into extra time here. Just on Graham Dunbar from the Associated Press, on the subject of Canadian values, I think everyone in the world has a very strong and clear idea of what they are, and they're almost universally positive. With that in mind, with all that's happened in men's curling, do you think there's any going to be longer-term damage on the reputation, but effects on Canada's reputation from that?
I'd like to think the world sees through it, that it's important for me, from my vantage, to emphasize that with all the hoopla, what took place on the ice a couple weeks ago was not cheating. The rules of curling contemplate in the sport, on the field of play, that if you double touch a rock, if you touch the granite, you burn the stone, you remove it. For me, it's like a foot fault in tennis or traveling in basketball. So if LeBron James takes 4 steps on the way to the hoop, no one says LeBron James is a cheater. They give the ball over to the other side. It's a turnover. And I understand the furor that's erupted on social media, but it's that part. That part's not fair. And hopefully we'll see that go away. What I equally know to be true is that Mark Kennedy probably regrets his choice of words. And he'll find the time and the place to express that sentiment beyond what he's privately shared with his teammates and his family and the rest of us. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, David. And just want to say thank you to everyone for making the trip to Milano Cortina to share the stories of our incredible athletes. Merci beaucoup d'être venu pour partager les histoires incroyables de nos athlètes. Juste pour signaler, Jen, Eric, and David will be available for about the next 10 minutes. They do have a very tight schedule this morning if there are any additional questions. And again, thank you, and we wish you safe travels home. Bon retour.